Toward the beginning of the film, we see Martha, an unusual lady sitting at her loft. She gives off an impression of being partaking in her alone time, yet right then, her sweetheart rushes in the room making out with another lady. When Martha defies him, there is no lament, all over all things being equal. He requests that she participate for a trio. Martha clearly rejects and she breaks up with him without even a second's pause. Anyway, her beau calls her out for not having any feeling of experience. This, as it were, compliments Martha's, as of now, awful state of mind. So she tosses something at his head previously, stepping out of the room. Somewhere else, we meet a contract killer, Mr.Right, whose genuine name is Francis. He is an ex-CIA specialist and hired soldier, with an exceptionally complex set of abilities, equipped for killing even the generally risky of hoodlums. Presently, he approaches a lady, and makes sense of that. He's the assassin she has employed to kill her significant other. He then puts on his unmistakable red comedian nose, telling her that murder is off base also, shoots her dead. The fact that Francis frequently wears makes it uncovered, the comedian nose to cause his casualties to feel agreeable while biting the dust. Furthermore, he kills the ones who enlist him, since this way, the geniuses can be disposed of. What's more, it can stop the endless loop of harming others, while Francis gets done with his task. Inside the lodging, outside, a group of professional killers is getting ready to trap him. The group is driven by Container, a hired gunman, who once worked with Francis in the CIA anyway. He decides to stay behind in the observation van, as he realizes that Francis will overwhelm the amateurish professional killers. As he had expected, Francis kills the professional killers individually, utilizing his extraordinary battling abilities. He doesn't equal break a perspiration while doing as such. After the episode, Container gets a call from his manager, who educates him to profess to be a FBI specialist and to accomplice up with a neighborhood police criminal investigator, Gus Patrick, who has been doled out to catch Francis in the interim. Martha and her flatmate Sophie go out drinking. Yet she is ceaselessly searching for her beau. She faults herself for him undermining her, while Sophie attempts to convince her. In any case, the following morning, Sophie takes Martha to her work environment, a pet store. There, our hero young lady gets a feline, regardless of admonitions that it's brutal anyway. Martha doesn't tune in, and the feline closures up, scratching Sophie thereafter. Martha makes a stop at a general store on her way home. Francis additionally is there, purchasing a few supplies out of nowhere. Martha cumbersomely finds a rack and dissipates a heap of contraception. Yet shockingly, Francis, with his exceptional abilities, gets them. Rapidly seeing this, Martha becomes awestruck and falls in head over heels. Love, they talk for a while, and Francis additionally loves her idiosyncrasy. He then welcomes her out on the town. What's more, the two wind up going through some heartfelt time together in the following scene. When Francis talks about his profession, genuinely, Martha accepts it as mockery. She feels that a work like this main exists in the motion pictures, sooner or later, as the two are walking around a recreation area. Francis, out of nowhere, understands that a contract killer is close by. His instinct ends up being correct when we see a man pointing a sharpshooter towards Francis. Fortunately, our legend quickly hits the dance floor with Martha, and avoids every one of the disasters one by one. He doesn't understand that they're being gone after the experience. The two or three winds up going through the evening together at Martha's place. The following morning, Francis leaves a note for her requesting that she proceed their date that night. This dazzles Martha also. She makes breakfast cheerfully anyway. Sophie is a piece wary about this secret sweetheart. That evening, Francis and Martha meet at a bar there. He meets Espinoza, one of the contract killers who left the inn prior. He then, at that point, pardons himself, and seeks after Espinoza outside. Once they are outside the bar, Francis lets the assassin know that he doesn't have an arrangement on killing anybody today. Yet, Espinoza is persistent. So he prepares his blade to go after Francis as usual. Francis evades every one of the assaults with his quick reflexes. Then, at a fortunate second, he kills the assassin by penetrating his throat with a similar knife. Meanwhile, two stepbrothers, Vaughn, what's more, Richie Sweatshirt, who come from a wrongdoing family, need to utilize Francis to kill a unique objective of theirs. Vaughn, the more youthful sibling, has aspiration yet needs insight and ability. Both siblings are in conflict with one another continually, and Vaughn truly cares about Richie good and gone. Vaughn convinces a neighborhood hoodlum to help him in recruiting. Francis, he needs to assume control over his older sibling's place and rule the neighborhood. Criminal realm, fundamentally, his technique is to recruit a hired gunman in the interest of Richie. The contract killer is ideally Francis, who has a background marked by killing the individuals who recruit him later at home. Martha comments that she doesn't even realize Francis's complete name. even after dating him for a couple of days. Accordingly, the ex-soldier of fortune says that he loathes his own name, so he doesn't impart it to anybody. He just has a solitary name, and that is Francis, as the two proceed talking. Martha inquisitively asks how he figured out how to get all the contraception pills at the odds and ends shop. Francis then flaunts his blade ability while endeavoring to persuade Martha to get them. She at first oddities out. However, as she gets the cutting edges, she gets a rush of happiness one evening. Francis carries Martha with him to the first meeting of the assassin work. This is since he needs to cause her to accept that he is a professional killer later. As she holds up in the vehicle, she sees Francis meeting a man on the extension, the last individuals anyway. Francis, before long, wears his comedian nose and nonchalantly kills the man. Seeing this, Martha goes crazy, and at last understands that her new sweetheart wasn't kidding about killing individuals. Comes restless and demands that he drive her home anyway. Unbeknownst to them, one of Vaughan's men tails them to her loft after Francis drops Martha off at home. She sits in dismay. Sooner or later, Container and Gus, acting like FBI specialists, show up at her home and interview her. Depicting Francis as a hired gunman, they likewise illuminate her that Francis kills off individuals since he keeps an ethical code of his, which is that killing is off base except if certain individuals merit it. Container then cautions Martha that Francis is a very hazardous person. Meanwhile, Francis pursues the choice to visit her condo. Container has been following his area, so he's prepared for him. However, out of no place, Francis assaults him from behind and hauls him inside. He then illuminates the young ladies that Container is Notan, FBI specialist, justifiably. Martha is uncertain of who to trust, as both the men have recounted her various stories. Yet after a touch of reasoning, she understands that Francis has forever been straightforward with her, so she goes with him to the room and they begin making out. Anyway, their heartfelt second is hindered when one of Container's folks reports through the radio that they're coming for Francis. This alerts our legend, and he rapidly attempts to leave. However, right then a few folks from the sweatshirt group appear. One of the professional killers named Steve shocks Francis with his remarkable battling ability. He has all the earmarks of being a prepared soldier of fortune too, while attempting to get Martha out of the house securely. Francis fends off a lot of professional killers. At one point he gets gone after by a slugger. However, he rapidly figures out how to grab it away from the professional killer prior to thumping him. Oblivious, Francis even jumps through the steps also, cripples different professional killers following this. He continues to kill Steve yet. Without a second to spare, he stops. He recollects how Martha had made him guarantee that he wouldn't kill anybody from here on out. Sadly, the slight interruption gives Steve sufficient opportunity to open fire. Francis nobly evades it with his hand and saves Martha. Yet in the cycle he harms himself. Regardless of this, he saves Steve's life, which is something uncommon to accomplish for such a popular contract killer. Steve himself is stunned, as this isn't the Francis he used to be. Aware, regardless, he thanks him profusely, saying he will not impede them from presently on Francis and Martha, then make their way outside, yet they are still encircled by a more prominent number of professional killers coming through. Vaughn and his men additionally show up at the scene, searching for Francis. The couple is gone after indeed, so they cover themselves close to a water tank to save themselves. Francis is compelled to open fire and kill one of the professional killers. He then, at that point, pulls a mental prank on them, letting them know that they will not have the option to get back to their spouses and children if they pass on today. Fortunately, the stunt functions as the professional killers gradually retreat and leave the premises. Francis and Martha likewise turn out in the open just to be gone after by Vaughan anyway. Vaughan in a split-second acquiescence when he understands that he gets no opportunity with a contract killer. Like Francis, he likewise acclaims his extraordinary battling abilities and assurance, yet to everybody's unexpected, this just demonstrates to be a stunt to occupy Francis the Sly. Steve shows up at the scene and strikes Francis from behind, thumping him down. Incidentally, he was simply lying about not coming after Francis. All things considered, he works for Vaughn and his men. Following this, Vaughn and Steve seize Martha and give a location where Francis can find them as they make their getaway from Francis. Battles Container, who shows up just after the mobsters leave the scene, yet soon he personally escapes without being identified in the following scene. Martha is brought to the pullover siblings back home. Furthermore, Francis continues trying to scare her. Vaughn insults Martha and smacks her 2 or multiple times. However, she remains undaunted minutes after Francis shows up at the house, wiping out all of the professional killers on his way. When he makes his way to Vaughn, the last rapidly grasps Martha and orders our legend to kill Richie. uncovering his unfairness to his sibling anyway. Francis easily saves her and says that he's finished with killing. He then leaves a firearm among Vaughn and Richie, saying they ought to settle the actual matter the second. Francis leaves the room, the siblings hop for there, they wrestle for some time, and Vaughn makes do to snatch it. He then, at that point, kills his relative without thinking twice. In the interim, as Francis attempts to escape with Martha, he by and by runs into Container. Furthermore, begins hustling with him. Then again a hired gunman catches Martha and takes steps to kill her. However, to his unexpected, she easily smacks him away because of the preparation Francis gave her prior. Sooner or later, the tough, once more, Vaughn makes an appearance to take retribution. Yet he also succumbs to Martha's extraordinary battling abilities. In the meantime, Container acquires the high ground in the battle and prepares to shoot Francis. However, right then Steve shows up from behind and kills him. It shows up that he has changed sides, by and by appreciative. Francis lets him know that Container is valued at $5 million. In any condition, hearing this, Steve begins celebrating, while the soldier of fortune couple leave hand in hand. Following this, the film leaps to 2 months after the fact, where we see the couple living the most ideal form of their lives in Vietnam. However, unbeknownst to them, a few terrible individuals are as yet following them, most likely to take vengeance on Francis' weapons.